Way back in the 90s, there were two main titles from awesome author R.L. Stine. Goosebumps, which was very kid-friendly, even though it was a horror series. I found it thoroughly enjoyable. In fact, if it wasn't for R.L. Stine and his Goosebumps books, I wouldn't have gotten into horror, and my nerd card would have one less facet to it. However, I never got into the Fear Street series. Apparently it was meant for older kids, but I ended up reading Goosebumps right up until they finished. And while they have made a resurgence, I haven't started over. But apparently Fear Street was meant to be followed, or meant to follow Goosebumps, because as kids get older, they get more used to concepts such as what was in Fear Street, which leaned toward the more mature. I wouldn't say Stine coddled kids with Goosebumps, but he did make it a little more digestible. This, however, or Fear Street, however, was meant to have more meat on it. More meat to chew on, you know? At least that's what I believe this trilogy represents. Because, oh man, it is very, very mature. The me that fell in love with Goosebumps should not watch this trilogy. But that doesn't take away its quality, because this trilogy, based on the slightly older young adult novel series of R.L. Stine, is, I would call it a masterpiece. We start in 1994, halfway through one of the greatest decades ever, second only to the 80s. Basically, there's a town that's divided in two. Shadyside, which has all the ne'er-do-wells, and apparently no one leaves, so generation after generation just stays in town, either mooching off welfare or getting dead-end jobs that are quite literally dead-end jobs, because they go nowhere till you die. The film centers around a young couple, two girls, who at first have a bit of baggage, because they used to be an item which was kind of risque in the 90s. I mean, nowadays it's whatever, you're a couple, but back then there was still quite a bit of stigma. Then one of the girls decided to just cut ties, because she wanted to get out of Shadyside by any means necessary. And if that meant getting into a relationship with a guy instead of who her heart really wanted, so be it. And we pick up with a series of murders. Well, one murder, or maybe two, I'm not sure, committed by a guy who seemed to be quite normal until he snapped. He killed someone that he cared about, and then in turn was killed. Later, someone described as a copycat is seen skulking around town. Meanwhile, in the other side of town, which I forgot to mention, Sunnyvale. Not to be confused with Sunnydale, where everyone is well off and also everyone is a jerk. I mean, there might be a couple of people who are okay, but for the most part, The Shadysiders are the protagonists and anti-heroes, and the Sunnyvalers are the antagonists and, spoiler alert, the villain. Anywho, a group of misfits, including the couple who eventually reconcile and come back together, try to figure out what's going on, why Shadysiders keep getting killed. Because this goes all the way back to Pilgrim times, back when the town was known as Union, and it was just one town. Apparently a witch placed a curse on the town, and sorry if I sound a little messed up, I'm under the weather, but I'm okay. It's not COVID. Anyway, like I said, it seems like a curse. Anyone who tries to leave who tries to leave Shadyside doesn't. They fail to do so. There's been practically 0 murders in Sunnyvale, and it's basically like a vampiric relationship. The Sunnyvalers have basically an ingrained need to target the Shadysiders, and it's really freaky. Funny thing is, there's not really any racial prejudice. Of course, it was the 90s, so that was sort of a golden age, not like we have here now. But anyway, like I said, the group of misfits tries to figure out why this is happening, mainly because one of the 2 girls gets targeted for execution. Ultimately, they find that someone figured out how to seemingly beat the curse in '78, which takes us back to 1978, a classic time for summer camp-based slasher flicks, and this one is no exception. It basically takes place in a summer camp where Shadysiders and Sunnyvalers can sort of compete in various camp games, but the Sunnyvalers take it way too seriously. Meanwhile, someone snaps and starts going after people, and it's up to a young Shadysider girl to snap her sister out of her stupor, because she has the same attitude about leaving Shadyside as the girl from the first film, only reality sort of hits her square between the eyes. Anyway, it's up to one Shadysider girl and a Sunnyvaler boy to solve the mystery and end the curse before all the campers and counselors are kaput. Unfortunately, the solution doesn't quite work, and they're just left with more questions. Although, through an act that should end the curse, ends up taking us way back to 1666, the founding of the town before it split, and a young Puritan girl who has done the unthinkable and fallen in love with another Puritan girl. And through various circumstances, the town are led to believe that one of the girls is a witch who seduced the other girl and put a hex on the town. And I'm not going to reveal the truth because you gotta see it to believe it, but basically we see the worst of human behavior at play here. People turn their repressed anger and whatnot toward their neighbors like that. I mean, these people haven't even turned serial killer, and they're just looking for someone to blame. Sadly, that's the way it is. People see something bad happening and they just want a scapegoat because they don't want to admit that it could be their own fault. Ultimately, the story comes all the way back to 94, and the group of misfits finally find out who was responsible ancestrally for the curse. And it's up to the descendants of the town proper and a few helpful spirits to finally destroy that person once and for all and end the curse. Overall, the story is very engaging, despite the episodes being about 2 hours each. The cast was phenomenal. You see a lot of Stranger Things actors here, and I think they've found their element. Period pieces from like 20, 30 years ago and way back when. I liked how the cast from the first two parts showed up for the third movie playing the original characters, original historical figures. Only they're not. They look different. We see a little of that in the end of the third film, but basically the cast aren't actually reincarnations. They're just playing parts. I guess that was a budget saver, so we could identify with the characters. But everyone acted beautifully. The ambience and the tension of will they or won't they save the day was practically palpable. The music, in my humble opinion, throughout the trilogy was great. Got some classic stuff, some more modern stuff. The gore was very, very visceral, no pun intended. The action and drama was very entertaining. And overall, the Fear Street trilogy is something you really, really need to see if you ever even picked up a single Goosebumps book, because this shows that R.L. Stine has still got it. And who knows, maybe it'll spark interest in the original Fear Street books. I know I'm curious now about a few of them. This is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, whether it be books or films or tales around the campfire, fear is something worth exploring because it's just so fun to be scared.